Go ahead. Perfect. Amazing. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday evening. Happy ACDC Voter Registration Month, August. Woo! If you don't know me already, I am Morgan Overton, proudly the Vice Chair of the Allegheny County Democratic Committee. And as stated tonight, we are kicking off ACDC Voter Registration Month. And we are very happy to be joined by two voter registration connoisseurs, Marie Norman and Anna Fisher, who are also fellow committee members. So we have the expertise right here within. And both of them will provide you all with the training and strategies that you need to activate and register new voters in your respective communities and beyond. And as I always say, voting is a vitamin. It's part of nourishing democracy, but it is a vital start of amplifying voices around the county and beyond, which is why we took the initiative to activate this month, the month of August, as Voter Registration Month. So without further ado, Marie and Anna, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Morgan. And thanks everybody for being here. We're so excited about voter registration that it makes us doubly excited to see other people who are interested in doing this. I'm going to share my screen here. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Good. Okay. Again, I'm Marie Norman. I'm in the 14th Ward, District 3, and Anna is my fellow committee woman in the 14th Ward. We're also both part of the Order of the Phoenix, which is a local grassroots group, and we've been working with the New Pennsylvania Project on voter registration, and we'll tell you a little bit more about them in just a minute. But what we wanted to talk to you about today was this. So the whys, the whats, the whos, the whens, the wheres, and hows of voter registration. So Anna's going to get us started off, and then we'll loop back to me, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. With no further ado, actually with one little bit of further ado, raise your hand, since some people have just joined, if you have done voter registration before. Can't see some hand. You can raise your digital hand. There you go. Okay, so there's a fair amount of experience here. So there may be some newbies, and there may be some folks with some experience as well. So with that, Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Marie. So it looks like lots of people have registered voters before, which is great. So some of this information may be not new to you. But the first thing I wanted to start with is why it is absolutely crucial that we register voters now. So the chart that you're looking at shows that over the past decade, Democrats have been slowly trailing Republicans in voter registration switches. So for every one Republican who switched to a Democrat, more Democrats switched to a Republican. And that has been a steady trend over the past decade. But then if you look at 2022, you can see that that trend has skyrocketed. These data are only through March, not for the whole year. The other bars are for the whole year, and we have a little bit of time to catch up. And hopefully, if we pour all of our energy into voter registration, this chart will not look like this by the end of the year. But right now, in 2022, the trends are downright disastrous for Democrats. So this is the now. Why is August the voter registration month? This is why. Now, you might be thinking, this is probably happening in rural counties. This probably is not happening here in Allegheny County. And that would not be the case. If you look at the first map from January through March, Allegheny County was the second reddest county, where second most number of people switched from Democrats to Republicans. And I see a hand from Lauren, and feel free to ask questions as we go along. Lauren?
There may be a leftover hand.
Okay, maybe leftover.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Okay. No worries. I just noticed it. So it doesn't look quite as bad from April through July, but the Allegheny County is still in the red. So it makes a lot of sense to do this work right now and right here in Allegheny County. So we're very grateful to Morgan and Sam for activating August as the voter registration month. So what I will talk to you now is just the mechanics of how to do it. And if you've done this before, this will probably not be new information. And then Marie will talk to you about how we approach this, where we go, sort of where we find the voters to register. So in terms of just the mechanics of it, people can register online at their leisure at home. They can register using a paper form. Both forms use the same information. You can download, if you want to go out and register voters, you can download and print this form from the website. You can pick it up from the elections office downtown. Marie and I can hook you up with voter registration forms if that would be helpful. So let's just quickly look at what information is being asked. But so before, there are some instructions that are right on the form. The vast majority of questions, about 90% of cases that you will encounter in the community, will be answered right on that front form. So don't worry if you don't know every intricacy of every rule, because most cases will be pretty simple. So people need to be residents of the district where they reside and want to register for at least 30 days before the following election. They do not need to have a Pennsylvania driver's license. One of the questions asks for it, but it's optional. There is another way for a voter to confirm their identity. So the residency requirements are pretty lenient, just 30 days. And on the next slide, we're highlighting just a couple of parts of this form. If you're talking to a college student and you're talking to them in September, chances are they will be residents by long enough by the time the next election rolls around. So students are eligible to vote in Pennsylvania if they go to school here, even if their permanent address is somewhere else. I work at CMU, and in my experience, it's a very common confusion where students are not sure if they're eligible to vote here. They absolutely are. The next kind of common question, not very common, but the question that you might think is tricky is whether people with criminal records or prior convictions can vote. Now, there are some cases where students, people can vote while they are in pretrial detention and some other intricate cases, but unless you're doing a voter registration drive somewhere in jail, if you're on the street, every person you encounter, as Marie likes to say, if their feet are on the street, they're eligible to vote. So if you're talking to the voter in person in the community, they are eligible if they have a prior conviction, if they are out on parole, they will be eligible to vote. And now I think it's just the mechanics. It's a single page with 12 questions, and most voters do not even have to answer all 12 questions. So it takes literally on the order of 2 to 3 minutes to register a voter. The first is self-explanatory, it's just their name. Eligibility is item 2. People need to confirm that they're citizens of the United States and that they're 18 years or older, which, by the way, if you're talking to a 17-year-old, ask them when their birthday is, because if they are turning 18 before the next election, before November 8th, they can register to vote. They're eligible to be registered even while they are 17, as long as they're turning 18 by next election. In item number 3, they need to provide the reason for why they're registering. And so there can be a tiny bit of intricacy here. So sometimes people check off the change of address when they're switching from another state. If that happens, they're a new registration as far as Pennsylvania is concerned. So change of address only applies if they moved within Pennsylvania. And so some people will be moving and they can move just down one block and have the same polling place. They still need to re-register. And if it's their first time registering in Pennsylvania, it will be a new registration. Those are by far the most common cases, but people can also register if there's changing party, changing name. It's all the same form. Whatever those reasons are, it's all the same form. Item 4, so they need to provide their birth date and their sex. The race is optional and the contact information is optional. It can be helpful to provide contact information so that they can be follow up with them in case their writing was not legible or some information was accidentally missing. But if people really don't want to provide their contact information, they don't have to, and they don't have to provide both. They can choose to provide one, but not the other. Item 5 is asking for people's address. That's pretty easy. It's wherever they reside and receive mail. One note here is that unhoused people are eligible to vote in all 50 states. They can provide the address of a shelter where they're staying, or just the intersection of a park, nearest park, if that's where they're staying. But they are absolutely eligible to vote. Item number 6, address where you receive mail. For most people, it's the same as above, so they don't even need to do anything with that item. Item number 7, identification. That's the one where I commonly get questions, because the way it's worded, people think that both items are required. Pennsylvania driver's license and last 4 digits of Social Security, but that's not the case. Either one of these forms of identification will be sufficient. If they do have a Pennsylvania driver's license, that's what they should use. But if they don't have it on them, it should still work if they just provide the last 4 digits of their Social Security number. So these are the first 7 items, and then the rest of the form. Marie, if you could please advance.
Yeah, but before we jump to the next one, and by the way, anybody should ask questions and speak up at any point. We got a small enough group here that, don't hold back. If somebody does not identify as male or female, they can leave those 2 unchecked. Okay? The form hasn't caught up to the times.
Yes, thank you, Marie. Party affiliation. People can fill out any box they like. If you can see them filling out a box that says unaffiliated, sometimes we like to remind that Pennsylvania is a closed primaries state. So if they want to have a say in who is the nominee for governor or senator, it makes sense to register with a party. Right now, before the general election, it's less urgent than to remind people before a primary. I see a
Anna,
hand, Mary.
yeah, you see the hand? Got it.
Yes, if someone thinks of themselves as an independent, would they check off none or other and write in independent?
None.
None. Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Independent is not an organized party.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
sure. Okay.
Oh, next one?
Nope. We're still on item 9,
sorry.
voting assistance. Most voters I talk to do not require any types of assistance, so they can leave this blank. Again, vast majority of people leave this blank. Marie recently talked to a voter who does require assistance. She could not use her hands. So occasionally it will come up that assistance is required, and then the voter should indicate, or if you are helping the voter fill out, like in that case where Marie was helping, you would indicate what kind of assistance is required. Item number 10, if your name or address has changed, again, for people whose name or address has not changed, they just leave this blank. And for change of address, again, it's not saying this clearly, but it's asking about change of address within Pennsylvania. So if people change their address from California to Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania doesn't care about that so much. Mm-hmm. 11 is very important. People need to sign this form that they filled it out themselves. And a lot of people just stop there because they feel once they signed it, they're done. But in small print, right below this big box, it says print your name and today's date. So I've had many cases of somebody bringing this form and then we're together chasing the voter in the farmer's market because the voter didn't notice and we didn't notice right away. So that's the first thing I check when the completed form is handed back to me, is to make sure that they printed their name and added the date. And then item number 12,
sorry about that.
One tiny last thing. So it's asking whether they got assistance with filling out the form. Again, the vast majority of people will just leave this blank. If they did get assistance, if you physically filled out the form for them because they cannot see, they cannot write, or kind of they have a disability that prevented them from filling out the form themselves, then you would fill out this form as the assistant who helped the person. So the whole form is 12 questions and most people only have to answer about 9 of them.
That's right. One more thing about 10 there. Nobody knows their PA voter number. And so don't worry about that. Okay. I don't know mine. You don't know yours with all likelihood. So skip it.
Yes, thank you,
Marie.
That's another way in which the form has not caught up.
Exactly.
Thank you. So this is all about the just mechanics of how do you register a voter. And now Marie will tell you about how we do it.
Great. Does anybody have any questions about the form before we move on?
I do.
Yeah.
This is Joe DeFazio. Hi, Marie.
Joe.
The last little part there of number 10 is by checking this box, you're requesting that you continue to maintain your annual ballot request status when updating your address. That would, I just want to clarify the role of that. That is so that, they'll keep getting, information from the state to request mail-in or absentee ballots at that address. Is that correct? Or is there anything else we should know about that checkbox?
That is my understanding, that if you check that, you will continue to get an annual ballot request if you have requested it in the past.
So I think that's a good one to have them check.
Yeah, I think that you're good point. Yep. So if they've gotten ballot request form in the mail in the past, you might want to ask them about that and have them check it. Morgan, did you have a question?
I do. I really do appreciate you amplifying the fact that unhoused people can be registered. And I just wanted you to expand further on that. So they're registered, and then what? You know,
Yeah.
how do we ensure that they have what they need to know what their polling place is, or knowing what their rights are, if they need to have any documentation with them, right? You know, how do we make that information accessible for that community?
Yeah, great question. So on the back of this form is a place where you can indicate a location where you live that is not a home with an address, with a street address. You can indicate the, the sort of cross streets and things like that if you do not live in a building. That's probably not going to happen very often. We're probably not going to talk to those folks very often. But if they live in a shelter or live in somebody else's home, they can put that address down, whereupon they will get a voter registration card to that address. So they will have a voter registration card mailed to them with a polling place on it. It's tough for people who do not have a permanent, kind of stable residence, because this is very much based on having a mailing address. But I have had people who are unhoused register with me using a shelter address.
Yeah, I put in the chat the further resource. I think it, as Marie said, it's really tough. Being eligible to vote and having the resources to vote is not the same thing. And I don't know if we have any specific pointers for providing resources to people beyond being able to register them. So at least they have the option of doing it.
Robert, did you want to elaborate on what you were asking about? So my biggest issue is pulling up a good precinct finder for precinct section. Can you, is that relevant to voter registration, or just sort of trying to figure out?
It's not entirely voter registration. It's more of a general question when it comes to somebody looking up their location. Not many people know what's a municipality or what their precinct is. They just know an area. I remember there being like some sort of website by I think PA Votes. I keep forgetting which one it is or what the actual URL. So
they don't need it for this, but you brought up, so you don't need to know your voting precinct or anything like that to register to vote. But you raised a good question here. People often wonder, wait, why does it ask for city and town and municipality? That's really sort of geared towards people who live in the suburbs. So you might be Monroeville, municipality, Pittsburgh. So people who write Pittsburgh don't have to write it twice, but that's generally sort of just helps to kind of locate somebody. These are a little bit, you want to get it as close to perfect as possible because you don't want to kind of disenfranchise anybody by accident. But there's some wiggle room in these registration forms. So the really important part is that the contact information be there, and the name and signature and date. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
And thank you, Anna, for the link.
Great. Okay, so the next question is, who can register voters? And here's the good news. Anyone can register voters. You don't have to be a citizen. You don't have to be a Pennsylvania resident. You don't even have to be old enough to vote yourself. This is something that anyone can do. It's just a civic, kind of form of engagement. The organizations doing this work, a few of them have already been mentioned, but locally, the Black Political Engagement, not Action, sorry about that, Black Political Empowerment. Black Political Empowerment Committee, BPEP, does a lot of this work. Sorry about the typo. The League of Women Voters, the PA Dems, Pennsylvania United, and our favorite, the New Pennsylvania Project. So the New Pennsylvania, if you know Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and I'm sure most of you, all of you do, she started the New Georgia Project with the goal of registering particularly people from communities that are often underrepresented, people of color, immigrants, young people. So this is Pennsylvania's version. And the New Pennsylvania Project has a goal of registering 50,000 new voters this year. They focus on underrepresented communities. One of the things we like about them is they follow up to ensure that the registration goes through properly, which you're never sure about, right? Because these are somewhat messy and understaffed offices. And they also work on educating and engaging voters, not just registering them. So the goal is not just sign them up and leave them alone, but kind of check back in with them, make sure they know what's on the ballot, and stick with them. So where do we do this? Here are some possibilities. So first of all, we look for places that are likely to have a lot of Democrats, because when we're registering voters, we have to register anybody who asks to be registered, regardless of parties. So we don't particularly want to seek out places with a lot of possible Republicans. So looking for places with Democrats is important. Those can be private places like, backyard barbecues, your own families and friends, pool parties, work parties, bring a clipboard, bring some forms, bring a pen, everywhere you go. It can also be public places on a random day. You can just go down to a busy place like Shenley Plaza, or stand out in front of a grocery store if they'll let you, and register voters who come along. You can also look for public places during events. We've had great luck during Pride and Juneteenth and the March for Women's Lives, or ban the, No Bands on Our Body. What was that one called?
Hands Off Our Bodies, March.
Hands Off Our Bodies, the Reproductive Freedom March. In terms of permission, we do ask for permission at special events, and it's always sort of polite and nice to ask permission, but you do not need to have permission if you are on city property. We've gotten this vetted with the city. They're fully on board with this. People can't kick you off city property if you're not obstructing foot or vehicular traffic. If people say no political engagement, here it's not political, this is civic engagement. It's nonpartisan, and it's important to our country. We haven't gotten too much, sort of pushback from folks. In terms of timing, October 24th is the deadline to register this go around. So believes that on your mind. We got to get these folks pretty soon. We don't have a ton of time to make up this registration shortfall that Anna described. So what does it look like? Here's some pictures just from the voter registration we've been doing. Again, this is the Order of the Phoenix, but working closely with the New Pennsylvania Project. So this was at the Squirrel Hill Night Market. We just grab a bunch of people and a bunch of clipboards and go. And we'll talk a little bit more later about how you approach people. This was at the Wilkinsburg Free Store on the left. We've got Dan Singleton over here with this baby. This is a good thing to do with little children. There's Anna with her daughter and husband. She generally enlists her entire family in the operation. And kids are, undeniable and too cute to turn away, and so it's all good. So those are some of the kinds of places. We've gone to big fairs and marches and farmers markets, but also smaller events. We try to get to as many of them as we can. What you need there, that's my dog Simon, by the way. He's been there registering voters at various times recently. All you need is a clipboard, forms, and a pen. You can have a table. It's nice to have a table, but you don't need a table. You don't need signs or decorations or fancy things, and you don't need a dog. All those things are good, but you don't need them. So how do you approach potential voters? This is where some people get sort of stuck. It's hard to walk up to a stranger sometimes. But I think it is easier with voter registration than it is for door-to-door knocking and canvassing. Just approach them with a smile and say something like, "Hi, are you registered to vote at your current address?" That helps prevent anybody from being offended that you would think they weren't registered to vote. And in some communities in particular, that seems a little offensive to imply that they're not registered to vote. But people don't always think, "Oh my goodness, yes, I moved last month and I do need to re-register at my new address." You can say just sort of, "Morning, are you planning to vote on November 8th? And is your registration up to date?" Or, "We're registering voters. Are you registered to vote in Pennsylvania?" Many of the voters that we've registered recently are transplants from other states. And, they're often from states where their votes aren't going to matter as much. They're from California or Colorado or someplace that's more solidly blue. And so talking to them about what their vote means here in Pennsylvania, where we're on this knife's edge as a swing state, is very persuasive. And again, you'll often hear, "Oh, and I can't. My driver's license is in California," and that's your chance to disabuse them of that idea. All right, just looking at the chat here. And what we've found, I think, is that people more often than not thank us for doing this, seem appreciative. Like, not everybody likes to be sort of stopped. They're trying to get places and they're busy, but there's generally a lot of appreciation where voter registration is concerned. Go ahead, Morgan.
It's me again. So I'm thinking about our younger potential voters.
Yeah.
And you might already handle this later on in the presentation. Can you debunk some of that confusion that I've encountered a lot in the past, where people feel as though they have to wait until they're 18 to register to vote? And there's a lot of confusion about the time frame for our 17, almost 18-year-olds.
Yeah. So with 17-year-olds, if they will be 18 by the election, they're eligible to vote. So even if they're only sort of 17 and a half, if they will be 18 on November 8th, they're eligible to vote. And that often comes as a very pleasant surprise to them. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I just know a lot of people have this question.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure it was put out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you go over the registration for college students again? And, where they should register if they're living on campus?
Anna, why don't you take that?
Yes, so they can register as long as they go to school in Pennsylvania and they reside here. It doesn't matter that it's not their permanent address. So some things I sometimes hear students tell me, because I work with students, is like, "Oh, I don't want to register back and forth. My permanent address is in New Jersey. That's where I voted before I came here. I don't want to switch back and forth." And I tell them, unless their plan is to move in with their parents when they move back, they are going to have to re-register at every new address they have, even if it's the same apartment building, but they just moved to a different apartment. And they just register on their campus dorm. They register wherever they receive their mail, and they're absolutely eligible to vote here.
So if they moved from one dorm to another, does that make a difference?
I would just re-register, because it's a crime to vote twice. It's not a crime to update your voter registration because you weren't sure. We had sometimes people say, "I really am not sure. It's been a while since I voted. I don't know," and they don't have a phone to pull up and check their registration. And they've said, "You know what? Worst case scenario, they'll just throw it out because you're registered already at this exact address. It's going to waste a little bit of people's time, but it's not a crime." And so if a student is moving and their address is going to change, then they should re-register. Basically, we need to update our registration with every new address we have, and it applies to students as well.
And with students in particular, or anybody who is kind of a little bit transient, make sure they've registered for a mail-in ballot so that they can vote, when the time comes around. If they happen to be home in New Jersey, but they're registered back here, that comes up an awful lot, and then they scramble, and sometimes they do not have a chance to vote. So it's a good opportunity.
That's the flip side. So students who live in New Jersey, they have permanent addresses there, they're eligible to vote here. And I emphasize to them that it's great to be able to just vote on campus or somewhere in your community and not to deal with the mail ballot. But there are some students who are in the opposite situation. They may be saying, "My permanent address is here. I'm going to go to school in California. Can I still vote here?" The answer is yes. And for those students, they better register for a mail ballot and request it super early. Does that make sense? That a student can vote in Pennsylvania if their permanent address is here, or if they go to school here and the permanent address is somewhere else. In both cases, they can vote in Pennsylvania. But in one case, it might make sense for them to vote in person, and in the other one, to request the ballot very early. And Marie, if this answers the student's question, can I say one thing here on this slide? I'm not sure, you may have it coming up later, but I'm so passionate about this one point. Most people you're going to talk to, like over 90%, they're going to tell you they're registered. And that's not a loss. That's not the time to go like, "Oh, never mind. I'm walking away from this event with 0 registrations or with 2 registrations. It's great. We want people to be registered. That's awesome. And voter engagement, voter registration and mobilization go hand in hand. Because when they tell me they're registered, that's great. I can high five them. I can say, that's awesome. We want people to be registered. Fantastic. How was your experience voting in the primaries? Did you vote by mail or in person? What are the issues that are most important to you? Are you planning to vote in November? It's just an invitation to a conversation where one person literally told me, I don't usually vote in midterms. What is going on this year? So when I knock on doors, if you've knocked on doors before, and as committee people, most of you have knocked on doors, I may get the list of 50 doors, maybe 70 doors. Rarely do I get the bigger list and complete it. Usually 50% of people are not home. So that's immediately, you go from 50 to 25 or 35. And then some people don't want to talk to you. Some people moved or are deceased, or somebody opens the door, but the voter is not home. So in a 2-hour hard canvassing shift, I don't have that many good conversations. When I'm standing in a busy marketplace, like farmer's market or another place, I get to have dozens good conversations. And I literally can remind over 100 voters, like, remember, November is coming up, and people high five us and thank us. So I just want to say it can be really hard work. The national average is 1 hour, which is why it helps to go to busy events. It's a numbers game. You ask 100 people, you're going to register someone. If there is only 10 people at the event, you might not register anyone. It's just a numbers game. But it can feel demoralizing when you have spent 2 hours standing on a busy market square and you registered 3 people. It may feel like, why am I doing this? What's the point? And the point is that you probably talked to 100 people and reminded them that there is an election around the corner, and commended them for being voters, and asked them what's important to them. So I'm just so passionate about this one point, that voter registration and mobilization go hand in hand. You're not wasting your time.
That's right.
Sorry, off my soapbox.
That's a good soapbox to be on. That's great.
But one other thing I wanted to say, I see Lara joined us a little bit later than the event started. So Lara, you missed the big shout out. This very scary map I showed you, everybody, Lara made it. And
that map keeps me up at night.
Yes, this map keeps me up at night.
So I know we're sort of coming up on time here if you only bargained on 30 minutes, so we don't want to. Yeah, Mary, go ahead.
Who mails the forms? Do you mail the forms, or do you?
We do. Well, we do one of two things. We either collect and return them to the New Pennsylvania Project, and they mail them, or we mail them and give the New Pennsylvania Project a copy. But we want them to be able to follow up, so usually we return them to them to send in. Saves people postage to do it with us. And one thing that when I'm sort of training people to do this, people are like, oh, aren't folks really reluctant to give you the last 4 digits of your social and all this personal information? I have not had one person raise that objection. Nobody said, I'm not going to give you my phone number and email, never. So it's just never come up.
How do we get them back to the New Pennsylvania Project? How do you do that?
So we're happy to play some role in that, like kind of scoop them up from various volunteers and take them back. We're doing that currently for people who are working at different events and locations. We sort of play sort of form roundup and take them over to the New Pennsylvania Project office, or you can drop them off there yourself. They're over in the factory on Penn Avenue, Penn at Braddock. But be in touch with us and we can help inform you about that. We'll leave you with some contact info. So various ways to get involved. If you're a committee member, you're already poised to do this in your own district, but find an event in your own community, if at all possible. Grab a partner just because it's more fun with somebody, and head out with forms and a clipboard, and that we can provide, by the way. We have forms, we have clipboards, so it's all, if you're going to be doing this work a lot, you might want to buy your own forms and get your own clipboard and get a stack of forms, but we can give you those. Elaine, did you want to ask a question?
Yes. Just kind of follow up on that question of how to get it to the New Pennsylvania product. It would be easier, I think, for me, like, to just know a place I could drop it off. And you said it's at the factory at Penn and Braddock. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. And I certainly have been to Penn and Braddock. Does seem like there's a lot of construction there right now and stuff. But but like is the factory, like would I know?
It's a little tricky. It's a little tricky. I would not recommend it for anybody who is not in touch with them by text message, because they have an office, but the office is behind locked doors. I have the code. I can go in there and drop off the forms at any time, but most people will encounter a locked door. So Marie has been graciously collecting them at her house in a box on her porch.
Okay, so we should instead.
I think Marie's house is a pretty good bet, and it's not that very location-wise. It's pretty similar. If you're going from the suburbs, it's not that far from their official office, and we promise we'll drop them off. I take a picture usually of dropped-off forms.
The other thing we could do is, if we get a lot more people doing this, is to get a couple outposts in the east, west, north, for picking up and dropping off forms.
And can we just, like, even if you weren't expecting them, if I just had a stack of 10 forms?
Yeah, anytime.
Do you have your address somewhere, or could you?
I'll give you that too. Let's see.
Okay.
So I put in there Katie Zamitis, who's the New Pennsylvania Project liaison for Allegheny County. So you can try to get in touch with her, but this is my address in Squirrel Hill, 1139 Whiteman Street. There's a bin, just a plastic bin, sitting out in front of my house on the porch with forms, clipboards, pens. And you can return completed forms to the same box.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure thing. All right. So there we go. We'll collect your forms and return them to the New Pennsylvania Project. And we also have some teams that are working on some recurring events. We have, at this point, a fair number of volunteers, and it's actually harder to find places to put them. So what we'd really like to encourage you to do is find community events in your own area and take them over. Just, like, make them your own. But we are happy to advise. This is our contact info. Anna and I are happy to hear from you, give our perspective, work through some, if you run into sort of complicated issues. I did have that person the other day who did not have the use of her hands. So how does she sign? And that was an interesting one. Sometimes you do get kind of complicated situations like around incarceration. Which is, if anybody wants to spend a little time talking about the nuances of that, we can, but I don't want to keep anybody later than they already bargained on. But we can stick around, happy to answer questions. Anybody who needs to go can head out, but we'd love to hear from you. And we really would encourage you to just kind of get, if you want to, get your feet wet by doing an event with one of us, and then peel off and start doing your own. Just watch out for events that might have a lot of Republicans, because we don't want to register them.
Marie and Anna, I truly appreciate the both of you. I mean, I've done this work, but it's always helpful to have a fresh perspective on this. And for folks who are new to this, or, they're not as out there comfortably in public-facing situation, what advice would you give to folks? Because this can be anxiety inducing for people. So what is some advice that you would give if, for example, you approach someone and they give you a less than ideal response, right? Mm-hmm. Besides that, just speaking confidence into people, right? Like you said, this is civic engagement, and the fact that people are willing to do this, they need to be proud of themselves and pat themselves on the back, but it's kind of scary at first.
Yes.
So, how do you break that ice?
I think shadowing somebody else the first time you do it is a really good way to go. Kind of, be a fly on the wall first. And seriously, within one session, you're going to be itching to do it yourself. And sort of try on your own style. Another thing is role playing is helpful. Just, and we could do some here if anybody's interested, but kind of role play an interaction where somebody says, no, I don't want to do it. I don't have time, or I can't do it. I'm not, I don't live in Pennsylvania, or my driver's license is somewhere else, or kind of think through how you would respond. But I think more than anything, it's to just have the courage of your convictions and know this is good work. This is good, important work, and Americans need this. And like Anna said, even if you just sort of talk to somebody who's already registered, or even somebody who brushes you off, it's not personal. People are busy. They have places to get, right? And just sort of let it roll off your back and move on to the next person. And you will have some really nice interactions that bolster you eventually. Yeah. Anna, would you say something, say more on that
that's
one?
pretty much it. Occasionally, some people will be, not pleasant. But that's not you. You didn't do anything wrong, unless you're getting into fist fights or screaming or arguing, which you're not going to do. So that's why it's helpful to have a partner, because you can just look at each other and go, oh, well.
Roll your eyes and
roll your
tell
eyes,
stories.
have some camaraderie and go on to the next person.
Yeah. The other thing we didn't talk about, but the New Pennsylvania Project is a nonpartisan organization. So when you do voter registration with them, you have to be strictly nonpartisan. You can't wear your Democrat T-shirts. You can't sit at a Democrat table. You're there in a nonpartisan fashion. But you don't have to be nonpartisan to register people. So you can register people as a committee member or whatever. It just can't be under the auspices of the New Pennsylvania Project.
And Marie, something that I haven't realized, that nonpartisan doesn't mean no issues.
That's right.
As Marie said, New Pennsylvania Project, our best event singularly has been Pride. And that can help. So we were recently at Open Streets, which is a very mixed crowd, but Marie brought a Pride flag because it's an issue. It's not a party. So you can have Black Lives Matter. You can have Pride. You can have issue-oriented, defend choice. And at that event, we saw some people mutter under their breath and not approach us. And that probably saved us from registering a few Republicans inadvertently. So nonpartisan just means that you cannot have party paraphernalia. It doesn't mean that you cannot have issue-driven paraphernalia, which I did not realize until last weekend. It was a big revelation to me.
On that exact note of equipping yourself with the issues on the inside, say you come across a really excited Democrat, but they want more information about Josh Shapiro's platform. How do you respond to that?
You are allowed to talk about candidates. So I saw Kadida Kenner, who is the director of the New Pennsylvania Project. I've registered some voters with her. I've picked up a few tricks. And one voter explicitly asked her about candidates' positions. So as long as you're not partisan, as long as you're not saying, Josh Shapiro is awesome, he wants to do all of the great things and his opponent is horrible. As long as you just give factual information of where they stand on the issues, you absolutely can talk about candidates. And it can be very difficult sometimes when people are really excited Democrats and they assume that you're there as a Democrat. So I make a point of saying, as a person, I have opinions. I hear you. I'm here in a strictly nonpartisan way, but I absolutely hear you. Just I cannot really be discussing those issues too much. Once I stepped out of a tent, which is like, okay, I'm out of the New Pennsylvania tent, I can high five you. But most of the time, it's pretty easy to not step over that line if you're just being factual.
And we make a big deal, especially when it's a new time, a first-time voter, a youngin'. We make a big deal of it, like everybody kind of, whoops and hollers a little bit because it's a big deal when somebody becomes a voter. So you can have some fun with it, and mostly, if you joke with people and, pet their dogs and, just kind of relate as a human, it's a good time, no matter, even if you get one registration. Yeah, Dee.
Hi, so I would like to know, how do you counter act the people who say, well, I didn't register to vote because I don't want to be called for jury duty?
Oh.
I think that has nothing to do with jury duty, basically.
I don't really know. Laura, do you know that, whether they choose jurors from the voter registration?
So I actually believe that has been the practice in Allegheny counties. And I've heard that from voters and then or non-voters. And I've also, Lisa Middleman in one of her public events mentioned that, and actually mentioned that the idea of diversifying routes of jury selection in Allegheny County in order to get more appropriately representative juries of one's peers and of all of our peers on the juries in Allegheny County. So if that question is coming up, I would suggest that you reach out to Lisa, since she's put thought into this question.
Okay.
get like a full or accurate answer, because it's definitely, Dee, it sounds like that's something that you've heard, and it's definitely something I've heard as well.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. I poll greet, and the place where I poll greet, my friend's husband came up and we were chatting, and I said, "Where's your wife?" And he said, "She's not registered to vote." And I said, "You've got to be kidding me." And he said, "No, she doesn't want to get called for jury duty." And he started laughing, and I said, "Oh, Tom, we've got to fix that." So, okay, so I'll reach out to Lisa. Thank you.
I think what I've always said, if people bring that up, is that I've been a registered voter for 35 years, and I have been called for jury duty once. So
yeah, I've never been called.
Yeah.
And I've been registered since 1996.
Yeah.
I just looked this up. Well, because most states do not use voter registration rolls for jury duty selection. Most states use driver's licenses. But if this website is correct, Pennsylvania is one of the states that does use voter registration rolls for jury duty selection. I would need to double and triple check this information.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This has not come up, but I imagine that this could. What has come up more frequently, and it is very disappointing, is when people say they just don't vote. And I try to have conversations, and people who don't vote, this spans whole range of opinions. I've gotten things that went into conspiracy theories because all Democrats are pedophiles. Heard that, not frequently, but that happened. And some people just are disenfranchised because it's like nothing, it's impossible to change anything. My vote doesn't matter. So those conversations can be heartbreaking. I've seen one of them end effectively in the voter registration. Again, Khadija is the person who did it. So I do not have her magic powers, but I try to use what made a difference in that conversation. I've used it several times. I cannot say I've used it successfully, but I'm hoping that at least I may be moving a vote, or maybe next time somebody asks them, they will be more open to it. What she said that made a big difference is, there are two things she said. And that's more towards voters who are disenfranchised, not to the ones who are into the conspiracy theories. Number one is that registering to vote doesn't mean that you have to vote, but it gives you the option to vote. There is a deadline. So if something happens the day before the election that fires you up.
That's right. You want to be ready.
Yes, you want to be ready. And the second thing she said, that, and those two things together move that particular voter, is that registering builds power even if you never ever vote. Because politicians, they do not go to communities where nobody is registered to vote, because they know that it's useless to them. They will go to communities where lots of people are registered to vote, because these are the places where they can get help getting into office or staying in office. So she said, whatever is happening in your community, the potholes, anything at all, just the act of registering to vote will bring power to your community. Now, actually voting will bring you even more power, but just the act of registering will put you on the politician's radar that this is a community I cannot ignore. This is a community I must invest my energy in. So these are, I can't say that I successfully used that on my own, but I've seen that work. And I'm, again, hopeful that multiple conversations like this can make a difference over time.
Those are great tips. Plan to use those. Yep. Any other questions?
Right, can I just log off?
Yeah.
There you go. Well, why don't we wrap it up there? But you've got our email addresses. Please get in touch if you have any questions, or if you would like to join us for an event coming up and kind of get your feet wet if you haven't done this before. Let us know if you need forms, clipboards, anything that would make it easier for you. Is your hand up, Alex?
Yes. What I did when I was out there one time, and we had the 14 judges or so running, and people actually engaged me. Well, what about this judge? Tell me about this judge. Underneath the papers, I had a quick bio of everybody, because I wasn't going to remember everything those judges did. So I had a quick bio in the back, and I would start the conversation, then I flip up to their name, if it was Marie McLaughlin, Miss Middleton, or whoever, and I would engage like that. So it'd be the same thing with Josh Shapiro, what he's done, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
nice. Yeah, because that can lead to a good discussion of the candidates if you're doing partisan voter registration. Yep.
Yeah, because I've got those inquiries. Well, what did this judge do for the community, or what is this judge doing, or, you know, specific judges. So I'd always have that. And I found that, you know, pretty, I found that a good tool for me. And I probably won't be knocking on doors in August until I recover here. But like I said, just information if someone wanted to use that.
That's good. Another good tip. Yeah, share your tips with us too. We can kind of put them together and share them with other volunteers. So if there are things that work particularly well for you, let us know. All right, we should let you go. Thank you all very, very much for coming. Morgan, thanks for hosting this. We're happy to do more in the future if you've got any need for that, and get out there and register some voters.
Thank you all so much. And thank you, Morgan, for now pronouncing August voter registration month.
Yay!
Onward.
Onward.
Onward. Thank you all so much.